Okay, hello Year 9 or anyone else that thought they'd give it a watch. Your next fortnight's topic is focused on percentages, but there is a lot of FDP, which means converting between fractions, decimals and percentages involved, so I've added that into the title here. Your first 3 lessons will focus just on percentages, so we're talking percentage of amounts, increasing and decreasing by percentages, and writing a number as a percentage of another number. Which number 3 does start to basically eke into the next 3, 4, 5 and 6, which is basically converting between fractions percentages, decimals percentages, and all of them together. Okay? Right, so let's go back up here. Find 10% of 80. So I'm hoping everyone is remembering that to find 10%, you divide your total amount by 10. Now that doesn't mean that 20% is divided by 20. It's just because if I have my original number, which is 100%, and I divide that by 10, then I'll have 10%. So I divide by 10 and I get 8. 20% of 80. Well, if you know that 10% is 8 and you know 20% is double that, you just double your 8. 30%, you do 3 times your 8. 90%, you do 9 times your 8. And so on. Loads of different ones there you can do. And it's the same with 1%. 1% is nice because you can just do 10% divided by 10, because we know 10% divided by 10 is 1%. That means we do the 8 from the top here, divided by 10 to get all the way to that, giving us, of course, 0.8. Oh, sorry. Whoop. Okay. 7% is 7 lots of that 1%, so you times that by 7. So in this case, 5.6. 7 times 8 is 56, and divided by 10, 5.6. Or just some of you could have just done that 7 times 0.8. So let's do a more trickier one, like 37%. Well, we know that 30% is 24 from here. And if we didn't, we could work that out quite nicely. We know 7% is 5.6 from there. Now, if you add those together, and if you're not keen on that, I'll line them up a bit nicer. Add those together and you get 29.6. Okay? So that's finding percentages. What about increasing and decreasing by percentages? Well, increase, it means you start with a certain number and you increase it. Basically means you add it on. So I take my 80. I find my 10% first, which I remember is 8. And I just do 80 plus 8, 88. With decrease, exactly the same, but I take it off. So I'm going to work out 23%. Well, a little bit of notes I'm going to do on this. So 10% I remember is 8. 20% is double that, 16. 1% is 0.8. So 3% is triple that, 2.4. So that's my 20 and that's my 3. Add them together, 18.4. Now that finds my 23%, but doesn't decrease 80 by it. I need to now do 80, take 18.4, and I'm left with 61.6. You can take your time doing that. Don't panic, it doesn't need to be that quick. Okay, right. Lesson 3. How can you write a score like 8 out of 20 as a percentage? Well, to start with, I'm literally just going to write it as a fraction. 8 out of 20, 9 out of 15. And if you can turn a fraction into a percentage, then you can do the rest. Which is why I'm going to move on to lesson 4, which is turning fractions into percentages and back again. Okay? So 8 out of 20. What does percent mean? Percent. Per 100. So I want something out of 100. I'm going to use what I know about equivalent fractions. I know that if I times 20 by 5, I can get 100 on the bottom. So I'm going to times the top by the same thing. That means that this is equivalent. 40 out of 100 is the same as 8 out of 20, just written differently. 40 per 100, 40% means it is worth 40%. So that score earlier of 8 out of 20 would give you 40%. Okay. 9 out of 15, I'm going to do the same thing. 9 out of 15. Now, 15 doesn't go into 100, but luckily, actually we can simplify these. I'm going to divide them both by 3. because they're both in the 3 times table, to get 3/5. And 5 goes into 100, so I can times that by 20 to get the 100, times the top by 20, gives me 60 out of 100, 60 per 100, 60%, which means this one earlier was also 60%. Okay, and another couple at the bottom here, 1/8. Now, 8 doesn't go into 100 nicely. There's a few different things you could do here. You could half both of these, getting you 0.5 out of 4, and then you would have to times that by 25 to get it up to 100. I'm actually going to aim to try and turn that into 200, because I know I could just get from 200 to 100 quite easily. And this goes into 200, in fact. If you times that by 25, it goes into 200. This is an extension question, guys, so try your best, but don't panic if you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's getting confusing. Times the top by 25, I get 25 out of 200. And of course, if I want that out of 100, I could just half both of those. So I'm just halving 200, halving 25, divided by 2. 12.5 out of 100 is 12.5%. You can, of course, have percentages with decimals in. And then, okay, what if we get given a percentage and we actually want to go back to a fraction? Again, that out of 100 is really important. 42% means 42 per 100, 42 out of 100. Now, that technically is correct, but it will always ask you to simplify your answer. They're both in the 2s, so I divide both of them by 2, give me 21 out of 50, and you can't go any further than that. So that's done. Right, lesson 5, decimals to percentages, and percentages to decimals at the bottom there. So, quick trick to go from a decimal to percentage, it is just times by 100, which means to get back, we just divide by 100. Some people remember things like, oh, whatever this is, that's what it's going to be over here. But if you times by 100, you're not going to make any little mistakes, which you can with these sort of questions. So times that by 100, boom, boom, that makes it 80. That one, boom, boom, makes it 8. So we're left with 88%. This one, times it by 100, boom, boom, 4%. Now, that's why I wanted to make sure I did both of these, because some people write that this is 4%. But of course, if you times that by 100, that's times by 10. Times by 100, you're going to get that 4 over there. If you put a 4 there, then this is going to have to be a 0. You can't just say 4 tens are just 4. 4 tens are 40. So I'm hoping you're happy with that. That was a bit confusing. So 0.4 times 100, well, times it by 10 makes 4. Times that by 10 is 40. So that's your answer. 17%, of course, we're going back now. So we're dividing by 100. So 0.17, divide that by 100. Now that's 6.2, so you might be tempted to write 0.62, but of course that divided by 100. Divide it by 10, will give you 0.62. Divide by another 10, will give you 0.062. So of course it is that, 0.062. All right. And finally, well, lesson 6, I'm not going to spend too long on, because actually you've done lesson 6 by doing what you've done so far. Use percentages as your go-between. So if you want to go between fractions, let's write them all down. If you want to go from fractions to percentages and back and forth, well, that was lesson 4. Check. And if you want to go between decimals and percentages, well, that was lesson 5. Check. Well, if you want to go from fractions to decimals, you can just go, boom, boom, turn it into a percentage and then turn that into a decimal. So if they gave you a fraction of, say, let's go for a quarter, and they want you to write it as a decimal, all right, so we're going to start with a fraction. We're actually going to turn that to percentage first of all, which means times them both by 25, giving you 25 out of 100, which is 25%. And then I'll turn that into a decimal by dividing by 100, giving you 0.25. So let's put that in brackets. They're my answers. Okay? Quarter turns into 25%, turns into 0.25. Some of you may know that you could also go from fractions to decimals by doing 1 divided by 4 and getting that. If you can do that using bus stop method, then go right ahead. But otherwise, there we go. All right, well, thanks a lot. And remember, if you have any questions at all about any of this, any of the worksheets you're struggling with, just put a comment in the Show My Homework. Thanks a lot, guys. Look after yourselves.